We tend to think of therapists, doctors, and social workers as like the ultimate problem solvers.
Right. The unshakable pillars.
Exactly. We picture them as these pillars of society, that people we run to when our own lives or organizations just get completely stuck. But there's this glaring, almost uncomfortable question that really never gets asked.
Which is?
When those professional helpers inevitably hit a wall, who helps them?
Yeah, it really is one of the most profound questions in the helping professions, because the reality on the ground is that even the most highly trained, deeply experienced experts, well, they encounter situations that they just can't fix on their own.
Or massive dysfunctional systems?
Oh, absolutely. The cognitive load just becomes too heavy and the whole machinery breaks down.
So today, we are going to look at the hidden back-end machinery of those helping professions. We are doing a deep dive into some academic research and clinical case studies on consultation and supervision.
Just to uncover exactly how experts guide other experts.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive, for you listening, isn't just to talk about therapists. We are going to translate these dense academic concepts into a really practical toolkit for problem solving in everyday life and work.
Because the frameworks these professionals use to untangle complex, sticky human problems, they're incredibly powerful for anyone trying to facilitate change.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how experts solve problems, we first have to draw a very sharp line between two approaches that sound similar, but are honestly completely different.
Right, counseling and consultation.
Yeah. We need to distinguish between fixing a problem yourself and empowering someone else to fix it.
What's fascinating here is that we aren't just talking about clinical skills. We're looking at fundamental frameworks for how anyone can facilitate change in a system.
So let's start with counseling. In the professional sense, counseling is a direct service, right?
Yes, it focuses heavily on internal emotional landscapes, personal growth, or resolving a specific psychological conflict.
It's very private.
Extremely private. It's highly confidential, it happens behind closed doors, and the professional is working directly, one-on-one with the person experiencing the pain.
It's very intimate, direct intervention. But consultation operates on an entirely different frequency.
It really does. Based on the clinical definitions, consultation is an indirect, voluntary, and work-related process.
With a strict problem-solving focus.
Exactly. And that word indirect is really the linchpin of the entire concept.
To bring this down to earth for you guys listening, here's an analogy that kind of helped me wrap my head around the mechanics of it.
I love this analogy.
So counseling is like being a mechanic who directly fixes a customer's car. The customer brings it into the shop, you pop the hood, you get your hands covered in grease, and you swap out the alternator yourself.
Right. You're doing the actual labor on the broken thing.
But consultation is like being a master mechanic who is hired to teach the shop manager how to fix the cars. Or, better yet, how to overhaul the whole workflow of the garage so the mechanics stop making mistakes in the first place.
That visual perfectly captures the clinical concept known as the tripartite nature of consultation.
Tripartite, just meaning three-part.
Exactly. It's a three-party system. So you have the consultant, who is your master mechanic. You have the consultee, which is the shop manager seeking guidance.
And then the third part is the cars.
Yes, the client system or the problem itself, the broken cars.
The consultant never actually touches the broken cars. They don't even bring their own toolbox to the garage floor.
Their entire focus is on the consultee. It's a deliberate chain reaction. You upgrade the consultee's skills and perspective so they can better serve their own clients.
So the goal is improvement, not just a Band-Aid.
Right. You're building capacity so the consultee can handle similar or even more complex problems entirely on their own next year.
Which is an incredibly powerful paradigm shift for anyone in management. But that brings us to the actual execution. Like, how does a professional actually intervene?
Well, when a consultant steps into a messy organization, they generally fall into one of 4 distinct behavioral traps or philosophies of helping.
And choosing the wrong one is a disaster.
Oh, an absolute organizational disaster. Those 4 conceptual models represent entirely different worldviews on how to create change. The first is the expert or provision model.
This is where the consultant walks in, looks at the problem, and essentially says, I will handle this for you.
Basically, yeah. They bypass the consultee and provide the direct service themselves.
Just step aside. Let the grown-ups handle it.
Pretty much. Then we have the doctor prescription model. Here, the consultant acts more like a traditional physician.
So they diagnose the issue and just write a prescription.
Exactly. They hand off a giant binder of new protocols and tell the consultee to implement them.
take 2 of these HR policies and call me in the morning.
Right. I imagine you can see the flaws there.
For sure. So the third model shifts the dynamic a bit, right?
It does. The third is the mediation model. In this framework, the consultant acts as a neutral coordinator.
They aren't telling people what to do.
No, they're unifying the efforts of different departments or individuals who are trying to solve a problem but are, failing to communicate. They untangle the interpersonal knots.
And the fourth model seems to be the real gold standard in the research.
It really is. The fourth is the process or collaboration model. Facilitator.
So instead of dropping a solution on the desk, their main job is to get the consultees actively engaged in uncovering the solutions themselves.
Right. They work side by side with the consultee to identify the root problem, brainstorm strategies, and implement them as a team.
I want to ground this in a real-world example because there's a case study in the chapter that highlights the massive trap of that first approach, the expert model.
Oh, the case with Rebecca. Yes, it's the ultimate cautionary tale for ambitious problem solvers.
So there's this consultant named Rebecca, and she's called in to help Ramon, who's the director of a mental health center.
And his center is bleeding efficiency. They're struggling to meet patient needs.
Right, so Rebecca walks in, defaults to the expert model, and just takes over the steering wheel. She is brilliant and highly efficient, so she starts doing Ramon's administrative work for him.
She redesigns the workflows entirely on her own.
But fast forward a few months, Ramon hasn't changed his own habits at all. Morale among the clinic's employees has plummeted because this outsider is running the show.
And the overall efficiency of the center actually drops lower than before she arrived.
Rebecca burns out in frustration, and Ramon is entirely dependent on her while remaining totally stuck in his old ways.
If we look at the psychological underpinnings of that failure, it's fascinating. Ramon actually rationalized his own lack of growth by convincing himself that Rebecca was just this untouchable genius.
So by doing the work for him, she inadvertently stripped him of his agency.
Exactly.
Wait, if you're hired as an expert, isn't it faster and easier to just use the expert model and tell people exactly what to do? I mean, you're paying top dollar for their expertise. Why not just let them fix the machinery so the bleeding stops?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it sounds perfectly rational on paper, and it's the exact trap that high-performing executives fall into constantly.
But it doesn't work.
No, because you have to factor in human psychology, specifically the friction of ego and habit. When someone swoops in and starts issuing unilateral orders, they almost immediately trigger what researchers call resistance.
So the people who ask for help actively fight the person trying to save them.
It happens almost every single time. Resistance manifests in incredibly subtle, destructive ways.
Like what?
You see negative mindsets, endless bureaucratic excuses, forgetting to send crucial emails, or even outright denial that the original problem even exists.
Oh, wow. So human beings just deeply resent being told they're incompetent.
Right, and they resent being sidelined in their own domain. Rebecca's intervention failed because she completely bypassed the messy, emotional work of collaboration.
She built a new system without building any human buy-in.
Precisely. She fixed the paperwork, but she broke the person responsible for the paperwork, which means the fix vanishes the second she leaves the building.
This is why the process and collaboration model is so heavily championed in the literature. Sustainable change requires a structured process.
And the research highlights a really brilliant 5-stage collaborative model by Scott and colleagues that effectively disarms that resistance.
Let's walk through the mechanics of those 5 stages, because as I was reading this, I realized it's basically a masterclass in how to manage any team project. I assume the first stage is just getting your foot in the door.
Yeah, stage 1 is preliminary. It's about deeply understanding the environment before you make a single suggestion.
You aren't setting goals yet.
No, you're deciding if your specific expertise is even a match for their culture and establishing a basic psychological contract of how you'll work together.
So stage 2 must be where the actual work starts, the exploration phase. But I imagine this is where the friction really kicks in. I mean, if you start digging into a company's files, people get defensive.
Oh, they definitely try to hide their mistakes from you. That is the exact psychological hurdle of stage 2. Exploration and goal setting.
How do you get past that?
A skilled consultant knows the consultee will initially present a sanitized version of the problem. Your job is to gather objective facts, conducting interviews, observing meetings to figure out what the problem actually is.
Right, not what the CEO thinks the problem is, but what the data proves it is.
Exactly. Navigating past their defensiveness.
Then we move to stage 3, which is intervention and implementation, designing the strategy. But based on the collaboration model, you can't just hand them the strategy.
You have to build it with them. If they co-author the solution, they cannot reject it later.
That's so smart. Then stage 4 is outcome evaluating the metrics to see if the strategy actually moved the needle,
And finally, stage 5 is termination.
which has to be the hardest part for a lot of consultants.
It is. You must intentionally end the formal relationship because the ultimate metric of success is that the consultee no longer needs you. They have the tools to fly on their own.
It completely flips the script. It moves the relationship from "I am here to fix you" to "we are going to solve this puzzle together."
Absolutely.
Now, we've seen how this collaborative framework operates on a micro level, like between two people. But the research also zooms way out. How do professionals scale these concepts to influence entire organizations or societies?
This brings us to the architecture of scale, how you shift from helping individuals to changing populations.
There's a great case study about a counselor named Katie that really illustrates this. She's doing fantastic one-on-one clinical work, and she finds it rewarding, but she hits an existential wall.
She realizes she wants to transition into consulting because she wants to make a difference on a global societal level.
Right. She's tired of pulling people out of the river one by one. She wants to figure out why they're falling in.
Katie's ambition maps perfectly onto a foundational framework known as Kaplan's 3-level definition of prevention.
If you want to understand how any organization scales its impact, you really have to understand how they navigate these 3 distinct altitudes of intervention. Let's translate these into everyday workplace terms. I assume the lowest level is just pure crisis management.
That is tertiary prevention. This altitude is entirely focused on treating acute disorders or disasters that are already in full swing.
So the goal isn't to cure.
No, the goal is reducing long-term impairment, aftercare, basically.
If you're a manager and you spend every Friday afternoon talking employees off the ledge because they're burned out and threatening to quit, you are stuck in tertiary prevention.
The car has already crashed and you're just doing damage control.
So secondary prevention must be trying to catch the warning signs earlier.
Exactly. It's the shift toward early detection. Secondary prevention aims to identify and reverse acute crises before they solidify into permanent damage.
You're actively scanning the environment to catch the problem in its infancy. Like, you notice your team is working late 3 days in a row, so you intervene on Thursday to redistribute the workload.
Right, before they actually burn out. You're replacing the brake pads before the car hits the wall, which leaves the highest altitude.
The most difficult but most impactful level.
Yeah.
Primary prevention.
This is a deliberate reduction in the incidence of problems altogether across a population. You are engineering the environment so the issue never has the chance to exist.
Stopping it before it starts. Like you implement a strict 4-day work week and ban weekend emails, making burnout structurally impossible.
Or you redesign the highway so head-on collisions defy the laws of physics. Primary prevention is about systemic change, fostering inherently healthy environments. It requires massive vision.
And shifting an organization from tertiary up to primary is grueling. There's a case study about a guy named Preston that captures this perfectly.
Preston's narrative is a painfully common reality in the helping professions and in corporate life, really.
So Preston works for a community agency, and he has this crushing epiphany. He realizes his entire organization is trapped in an endless loop of tertiary prevention.
They're seeing the exact same clients, presenting the exact same severe acute problems month after month.
They're just a disaster management factory. They're exhausted, their empathy is depleted, and they aren't actually reducing the net amount of suffering in their city.
They're bailing water out of a sinking boat with a teaspoon instead of patching the hole in the hull.
Right. So Preston decides he has to implement a strategic plan to drag his agency up to primary and secondary prevention. He wants to change the system to catch people earlier.
Preston is undergoing a profound professional evolution there. He's transitioning from a counselor managing localized pain into a systems consultant.
Recognizing that individual interventions can't solve structural rot.
You have to travel upstream.
Which naturally leads us to the final and honestly arguably most vital piece of this entire ecosystem. We've talked about untangling workplace knots with consultation and scaling impact through prevention, but who acts as the ultimate quality control? How do we ensure that the professional helpers themselves don't stagnate, become cynical, or lose their edge over a 30-year career?
That introduces the absolute necessity of supervision. And we have to be incredibly precise here because supervision is fundamentally different from consultation.
Both ethically and practically. Earlier, we established that consultation is voluntary. The shop manager decides if they want to hire the master mechanic, and they can ignore the advice if they want.
It's also temporary. Supervision strips away that voluntary nature. The clinical definition of supervision is an interactive, ongoing, and strictly evaluative process.
So a more proficient, senior professional actively oversees and assesses the work of a junior member.
Exactly. It's not an optional perk. It's a required permanent fixture of the profession.
So if consultation is like calling IT when your specific laptop crashes, supervision is like having a senior software engineer systematically review your code every single Friday.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
They're checking for vulnerabilities, yeah, but they're also making sure you're evolving into a more sophisticated programmer over time.
And the stakes are incredibly high in supervision. The supervisor isn't just brainstorming solutions. They carry the ethical and often legal liability for the quality of care the junior professional provides.
Their job is to protect the public while forging the professional identity of the supervisee.
Just like with consultation, the research provides frameworks for how to actually execute this without being, well, a terrible micromanager.
One model that really stood out is the discrimination model. It seems to require an exhausting amount of emotional intelligence.
It requires near-perfect psychological agility. The discrimination model dictates that a supervisor can't just use one management style.
They have to continuously read the room.
Right. Evaluate what the supervisee is lacking in that specific millisecond, and pivot between three distinct personas: a teacher, a counselor, or a consultant.
They have a wardrobe of different hats, and wearing the wrong one just ruins the meeting.
Completely. If a junior employee lacks a technical skill, the supervisor puts on the teacher hat and provides direct instruction.
But if that same junior employee is suddenly overwhelmed by imposter syndrome or trauma from a difficult case,
Teaching them a new skill is useless. The supervisor must instantly switch to the counselor hat to help them process that emotional flooding.
and if the junior person just needs a sounding board to brainstorm a strategy, the supervisor adopts the consultant hat to facilitate collaborative thinking.
Right, because if you try to act like a strict teacher when your employee is crying in your office, you are going to permanently damage that relationship.
It requires reading the emotional data perfectly. Speaking of reading data, there's another framework for supervision called the triadic model.
A fascinating structural disruption of traditional management.
Because normally, we picture supervision as this stark, one-on-one dynamic across a desk, boss and employee. But the triadic model places one senior supervisor in a room with two junior supervisees simultaneously.
It completely rewires the power dynamic. When you have two junior professionals navigating the feedback process together, you instantly dilute the intimidation factor.
It creates a micro-community.
It really does. It fosters immediate peer-to-peer learning. The supervisees aren't just absorbing wisdom from the boss, they're watching their peer make mistakes, receive critique, and improve.
It normalizes failure and accelerates growth exponentially. Now, I want to make sure you listening walk away with something you can use in your very next meeting. The research details an acronym STIPS that clinical supervisors use to evaluate their supervisees.
It's an incredibly useful tool.
As I looked at it, I realized this is a brilliant mental model. It's a way to manage your own mental load when you're prepping for a stressful one-on-one with your manager or trying to organize a complicated project.
The STIS acronym is a masterclass in overriding our natural cognitive biases. When humans are stressed, we tend to present problems as massive, entangled emotional narratives.
And STPS forces you to dismantle the narrative into objective data. Let's walk through how this works in practice. So the S stands for signs and symptoms.
This means stripping away your feelings and listing the observable, undeniable facts of the problem.
This is the most crucial step. Focusing on signs overrides the brain's panic response. Instead of saying, the client hates us and everything is falling apart, you say, the client has missed 3 consecutive meetings and emails are going unreturned.
You ground the conversation in empirical reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the T is for topics discussed. If you're reviewing a project, what were the actual core themes that dominated the conversation?
Right. And the I is for interventions used. What specific measurable actions did you take to alter the situation?
Which naturally leads to P, which stands for progress, and the continuing plan.
This forces accountability. Did your intervention actually work? It demands a measurable outcome and a definitive next step.
It prevents you from just venting endlessly. And finally, the last S is for special issues. Flagging any unique variables like an unexpected budget cut or a sudden personnel change.
STIPS Signs, topics, interventions, progress, special issues.
If you walk into a performance review and frame your chaotic month using that exact sequence, you instantly project competence and clarity.
You transition from being overwhelmed by complexity to being a master of the data.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out and look at the whole board. We have decoded a massive amount of behavioral machinery today.
We really have.
We explored the subtle, powerful difference between directly fixing a problem and indirectly consulting to empower someone else. We analyzed the catastrophic trap of the expert model and why true, messy collaboration is the only way to bypass human resistance and build sustainable change.
We charted the path to scale, using Kaplan's prevention altitudes to move an organization from bailing water in tertiary crisis mode to engineering a primary environment where the crisis never occurs.
And we unpacked the rigorous ongoing world of supervision, revealing how tools like the discrimination model and the ST-DIFE framework ensure professionals never stop evolving.
Whether you are leading a division at a Fortune 500 company, advising a startup, or just trying to help your community organization function better, knowing when to be the commanding expert and when to be the collaborative facilitator, it changes everything.
The frameworks we discussed are the difference between temporary relief and permanent transformation. But there's a stark, almost ominous warning buried at the very end of this research.
It's a sobering point. The clinical data explicitly states that counselors, or professionals in general, who stop receiving rigorous supervision, who step out of these evaluative ecosystems, almost universally stop growing.
And worse, they often begin to regress.
Yes, they develop unhealthy professional and personal blind spots, because humans simply do not naturally course correct in isolation.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to close on. If highly trained, deeply empathetic human beings are practically guaranteed to stagnate and regress without a formal, continuous system of external supervision and mentorship, who is in your triadic support system?
And what happens to your own growth if you try to do it all alone?
Something to think about the next time you try to solve everyone else's problems without asking for help yourself.